Hi there, I'm Amanda Blue from San Francisco World Spirits Competition, and I am going to be talking to Fawn Weaver, the CEO and founder of Uncle Nearest Distillery today. So we're going to try to get her on. Hi everyone, just waiting for Fawn Weaver to join us. There she is. I see her. Fawn, um, can you join? Okay, I just. Hi,
Hello.
how
How
are
are
you?
you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, I'm loving your background. Are you
Oh,
in
I'm
are
in
you in San Fran?
no, I'm in Los Angeles. This is my backyard. It's
Wow.
also a preschool
Oh, okay. Yes.
and a high
Welcome to
school and an office and all that kind of stuff.
I love it. What area of LA are you in?
I'm in Mandeville Canyon.
Okay. All right. So before we moved to Tennessee, we were in Old Agora. So if you go
Okay.
straight up toward Ventura,
Uh-huh.
yep. So
So you moved from Los Angeles to Tennessee.
I did.
How
Like
was that?
fantastic, but I swear everybody else is following me because during the pandemic, Nashville specifically, it was either Tennessee or Nashville, is the number one place for one-way U-Hauls.
Oh, wow.
So on the other side of this pandemic, I have a feeling we're going to all be vaccinated. We're going to go back out into Nashville and be like, who the hell are all these people?
They're all Californians.
They're all Californians. I love it. You know, where I was in Old Agora, people look at it and go, how did you go from LA to Lynchburg? And people don't consider that LA has a lot of different facets. And the area that I was in, where I specifically chose, was an equestrian community. So one of my neighbors had cows and chickens and donkeys, and another one of my neighbors had like 30 horses. And so moving and being with a bunch of land and all the rest of that stuff for me was absolutely not that big of a change. And our community of Old Agora was really close knit, just like it is in Lynchburg. And so it did not feel as fish out of water as people might think.
Got it. So you just, I just saw online that you just cleared a big milestone for your company.
Yeah, yeah. So we are the best-selling African American founded spirit brand of all time. That's not just on the whiskey side,
Amazing.
that's period. So on one side, it's amazing. On another side, you're like, I feel like someone should have hit these numbers
Right.
beforehand, but it just has never happened. Even among the celebrity brands that people look at and they know either it wasn't founded by that celebrity, which is 99.9% of the time, or if it was,
Mhm.
they've not been able to come close to what we've done. So yeah, it's pretty special, especially it's coming out of Tennessee. That
Right.
there's just something about that to me, that this particular story and this particular brand is coming out of this small town in Tennessee, when you would expect something like this to be coming out of LA or New York or
Hmm. Hmm.
some place like that. I,
Right.
I love the fact that it's coming out of Tennessee.
So I read that you were trying to research nearest green
Yeah.
for possibly a movie project.
for both book and a movie. And so we actually put this in development with one of the top studios right before the pandemic hit.
Oh,
And as we kept looking at it, I've always been adamant. I've had a lot of the studios reach into me. My husband's an executive vice president for Sony Picture. My other sister's over at Disney. My brother-in-law's at Warner Brothers. So so I've had all of the studios reaching in about this story almost since the beginning, but I've always been adamant that it's a feature film. And I was always
and did
adamant.
that lead to the brand, or did the brand lead to the exposure of the story?
Oh, well, the exposure of the story came because of the brand.
That's what I
So
thought.
doing the research for the brand, nobody would care about it if it wasn't going out with Uncle Nearest. So if you think
Hmm.
about all the different stories, especially over the last couple of years, well, the last year really, where you started to see more stories related to Black history, if you try to remember 90+% of them, you won't. And so I really do believe the only reason we're talking about who Nearest Green was and his legacy is because there's something we're actually able to enjoy together. And there's something about whiskey, it's like music. It truly is the great equalizer, right? Of all people, of all backgrounds, of gender and all the rest of that stuff. And so I think that there's just something special about being able to gather around and tell this particular story over this particular whiskey. And it is just sort of passed from glass to glass. I
Hmm.
had someone tell me recently in Atlanta, they had spoken to one of my team members down in Atlanta, Jay Madison, and he said it was the craziest thing because he came in to sell to our company, and they're a pretty large company, and we said, yeah, we'll put Uncle Nearest in all of them. But he hadn't told the story yet. It was just based on the strength of the juice. And he's like,
Well,
no,
I
you need to.
say your the juice was what was tasted at our competition,
Yeah,
and we don't know the story at all, and because it's
yeah,
completely blind, and it won big. But
yeah,
if you could tell, I know a lot of people here already know the story, but if you could
yeah.
tell us maybe a little bit about Uncle Nearest and Nearest Green and all
Yeah,
that.
you'd be surprised at how many people aren't familiar with this still. And
It's an
I'm always
amazing story.
it's an incredible story, and I feel like we've all been talking about it nonstop for the last 4 years. So I feel like everybody should know, but I'm telling people who've never heard about it every day this
Hmm.
story. And the short version, the condensed version of it, is that Nearest Green was the first known African American master distiller. In and of itself, that would be something to celebrate, something to acknowledge, something to really kind of really bring his legacy into an industry that we've never really talked about anyone who wasn't white male. A few women every now and again, but we still don't have their names on bottles. So that's a whole other subject. But when you're looking at Nearest Green, that by itself is enough. But because I believe, because he was the teacher of Jack Daniel, the mentor of Jack Daniel, the first master distiller for Jack Daniel, and Jack happens to be the most famous American whiskey maker of all time. And then as you begin peeling back the layers of this story, and you realize this took place in the 19th century, and you had this white orphan and this African American man who was teaching him. And during that period of time, somehow, some way, they created this relationship that was built on a mutual respect, a mutual honoring. That's not something you hear coming out of the South. You don't hear it during that time at all, but you especially don't expect to hear it coming out of the Deep South.
Hmm.
And so that story by itself is something that I think that people have also celebrated. But long story short, when Jack was alive, when his descendants were alive and they ran the distillery, everybody knew who Nearest and his boys were, because Nearest's boys, his sons and his grandsons, continued working alongside Jack and Jack's descendants. But when they were alive and when they ran the distillery, not only were they very clear in crediting Nearest for his role and his descendants for their roles, but they were also very clear in crediting the enslaved people for bringing in the Lincoln County process. And you know this, the only thing that distinguishes us from our counterparts up in Kentucky is the Lincoln County process. It's taking your traditional bourbon distillate and you're running it through sugar maple charcoal. Well, that's something to this day that if you go to West Africa, more than 95% of the trees are cut down for wood fuel and charcoal because they use that charcoal to purify their foods and to filter their waters. So imagine coming to this country And you know what some of that whiskey was tasting like then.
Hmm.
We've smoothed out the edges over time, but
Not a
that
double gold winner.
not, not a double gold winner at all. And so I could just imagine these enslaved people making this product for their masters and going, y'all drink this on purpose? Like, this is what you've chosen? And finding that this is something that was able to mellow. And so that really why Nearest Green is so important in this industry and in this story is, number one, our country is not all white, and only 30% of our country is white male. And yet every story in the whiskey business up until now, American whiskey, has been exclusively about that 30%. And what Uncle Nearest has done, and our team, our executive team of all women, which you know, what we've been able to do
Amazing.
is say, hey, there's 70% more in this country to add to that 30%. It doesn't take away. We have so many huge supporters that are white male. It doesn't take away from that demographic to say, hey, there's also 70% more.
Hmm.
And so we came into it and said, we want the entire world to know this story. And so we set about doing it. And, I think we've only scratched the surface.
So exciting. So
Yeah.
tell me, how did you go about finding an all-female team? I mean, I saw another article that you are the only whiskey company that has an all-female executive team. Amazing.
Yeah, I
And that,
don't know. I didn't set out to do it. And the crazy part, it wasn't until I was talking about all of my different executive team leaders in the press. Maybe I was talking to someone maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, but I think closer to a year and a half ago. And as I was talking about Victoria Edie Butler, our master blender and fifth generation Nearest Green descendant, Sherry Moore, our head of whiskey operations, Jack Daniel descendant, and then Catherine Jerkins, our head of sales. And the person said to me, the journalist said, wait a minute, did you just say all women? And
you
I
hadn't even pieced it
literally,
together.
I hadn't thought about it because I didn't set out to put together a team of all women. I set out to find the best with the best heart. And we didn't set out to do this to build a company really quickly and then to flip the company, to sell the company, to line our pockets. And so I aligned myself with people who were like me, where the story came first. Cementing the legacy of Nearest Green came first. Not only did I align myself with executive team members, but even the investors. I've turned down more investors than I've accepted. And a part of that is wanting to make sure that I've surrounded myself with people who care about Nearest's legacy being cemented for hundreds and hundreds of years down the road, more than they care about what is happening in this moment.
And so how are you able to find the descendants of Nearest Green to be able to be a part of your team? I mean, that's amazing. Both Jack Daniels and Nearest Green, that's incredible.
So here's the crazy part is it was through Jack's family.
Oh,
So
wow.
I
So they've
showed
been
up
very supportive of the process.
from the beginning. Most of them. I don't know all of them. I know all of
Mhm.
Nearest's family, and they are all supportive. But Jack's family, I only know who I know, and which, as far as I'm concerned, is all that matters. But those who have been around from the very beginning. So I was in Lynchburg. First place I went to when we got here was the library to do research on the story. And one of Jack's descendants came in, and I'll fast forward through our conversation. But by the bottom line is, as I said, listen, I'm here to tell the story of Nearest, and it is a story that what I said to her is, I'm not here to harm your family's legacy. Those were my exact words to her, because I thought it was really important that she knew that based on what research I had been able to do from Los Angeles, I had determined that the negative things people were saying about Jack and this relationship and why Nearest's name had not been spoken for some time, they kept pinning it on Jack. And I was like, I don't believe this had anything to do with your family. I actually believe your family was the family who wanted everybody to know who Nearest was, who wanted the world to know who Nearest was. And so after that, she, pulls out her cell phone and she gives me the name and number of the most important African American in this community as it relates to this story, a Nearest Green descendant by the name of Juanita Dunlap, who had spent the prior 30 years doing genealogy research
Oh, wow.
on all of the African American
Gold.
families.
Wow.
Exactly. But they grew up together. Nearest's family and Jack's family, they ate around the same dinner table. They played together. They were friends. And so for her, she's like, if you're gonna tell this story and you're gonna tell the truth, this isn't some type of gotcha, but you really are going to go in there and tell the truth. She knew that the story was positive, so she didn't have any concern as to what I would be digging to find if, in fact, I had come there to search for the truth, and I had. And so after she connected me with Nearson's family on her way out of the library, she said, hey, you know that book that you read that brought you here? It's a book called Jack Daniel's Legacy, his only authorized biography. And she said, you know that farm where he grew up, where the distillery was, where all this stuff took place, you realize it's for sale.
Oh my.
Right. So 15 months that property had been for sale. Now, I don't think anyone realized, everyone thought that that was like home of Dan Call Distillery, or DH Call Distillery, and that Nearest taught Jack how to make whiskey in that distillery as the master distiller. What they didn't realize is that that was distillery number 7, and that the original Jack Daniel distillery was on that property. Otherwise, it would have been purchased, right? But nobody, for whatever reason, no one knew. And
How did you
so,
find that out?
well, research. The crazy part is I didn't even have to go far. That was in the archives here in Moore County. The archivist she was like, hey, Fawn, you want all the leases of Jack leasing that property and renaming it Jack Daniel Distillery? So I wasn't even looking for that, but it was one of Jack's descendants who came to the property one day after we had purchased it, and he said, this belongs to you, or this belongs to this property. And it was a metal jug stencil that's just kind of shaped like this, and it said Jack Daniel Distillery, no apostrophe, no S, and he had found it when he was metal detecting nearby the original distillery. That was our first clue that Jack Daniel Distillery began there. We didn't know before that. When we bought the property, we had no idea.
It sounds like everything kind of lined up in a really easy and beautiful way.
Listen, it was meant to be. And a lot of people get confused when I am telling this story of Nearest and the importance of his legacy and cementing that. But then I am very adamant that we do that while making sure that we also raise up Jack Daniel in that process, because he's the only reason we know who Nearest was. Not just because he was this big whiskey maker, but because he made sure his name was written down. His descendants made sure in the press they actually said his name. This is who taught him. This is who was the first head distiller. And so because of that, I am always very adamant, but also I recognize that the numbers that folks are seeing this morning from this brand, that is not normal. Under no circumstances is that normal. And every one of as great as my executive team is, we are all aligned and agree that we are not this good, that we are absolutely being helped by someone who finds it important that Nearest's legacy be told. And people ask me all the time, well, who do you think that is? I said, well, there's 2 people in heaven that I think care about this story. It's Nearest and Jack. And there's only one person in heaven who I believe cares about this story in the manner of elevating this person and making sure he has his own whiskey and making sure his name is in the record books forever. And that's the person who he mentored. That's Jack. And so when I'm telling this story, to me, it's so important that we get the story of Nearest Green right. But at the same time, our founding principle for this company was to raise up the legacy of one man to raise up one legend without harming the legacy of another. And really so beautiful. That's what we have done from day one, because I have no doubt that they're the ones playing puppet strings in the air. And I'm like, y'all, I'm not going to screw this up. On a very regular basis, I'm like, thank you for all this you're doing. I'm not going to screw this up.
Well, you have it all. It's been amazing. You've had it. It's been how many years have you guys been in production?
3.5. We started laying down our own. What we began sourcing from the very beginning and continuing to age that product so that what we had in the marketplace did not taste like anything else. But simultaneously, we began laying down our own barrels back in 2017. So our Tennessee whiskey is of age this year. And now I can't tell you when you're going to see it. Or when the market will see it, because for us, it's what we know is that Nearest's whiskey, when it was in the bottle, was somewhere around 6 years old. What we have in our bottles is older than 6 years old, but what we know he had in was about 6 years old. So when we tasted it at 2 years old, we were like, this is going to be phenomenal at 4. And so we could absolutely put it into the market then. I don't know that we will. It's important that when we finally do, that it feels legendary, that it doesn't feel like we rushed to put that juice in the bottle, that it feels like this was the legendary juice that was 160 something years in the making. That's what it has to taste like when it goes into our bottle. So
Amazing. And what are your plans? What are your next plans for the brand going forward?
well, we opened up phase 1 of the distillery in September, and we opened it up to the public, and then pandemic. But we were only open on the weekends. Monday through Friday, it was construction for us. And so all of the construction crews doing phase 2, building out phase 2, they would literally have to clean up every Friday for us to have tours through there on Saturday and Sunday. And so after the pandemic hit, we said, you know what? We're just going to keep this closed and wait until this thing is over. Now, mind you, we didn't think it was going to be this long. but we said, let's just find all of the team members jobs on the production side or the sales side, or some of them are on the foundation side, sending out N95s and masks to anyway. But we basically found everybody other jobs and said, once we get to the other side of the pandemic, we'll reopen and we'll open up with phase 2. So we opened June 19th with phase 2. And I am so excited to welcome a lot of vaccinated people, a lot of vaccinated people to the distillery, so that we can just really enjoy life and enjoy each other again. And there is a bottle that we are releasing specifically for that will only be at the distillery. So I suspect there will be a lot of people coming down for that. I believe you all have it though.
That moved from California, probably.
Listen. When we opened up September 5th of 2019, we literally, where our distillery is, it's about 25 minutes north of Lynchburg, and it's about an hour south of Nashville. In order to get into our property for our opening party, both sides of the highway were backed up 45 minutes.
Wow.
So, and that was phase 1. That was before the world knew who this brand was. So we have an amazing whiskey family. Those who we call our folks that are online, who support us, they're the ones who literally go out store to store and say, do you know the story of Nearest Green? Do you know it's the most awarded American whiskey in 2019, 2020? Do you know, like, they literally go and get us on shelves, and then they go and buy from the shelves. And so one of the things that I love is, I think the reorder rate for new brands or newer brands, we're 3.5 years old, that is barely 20%, because there just isn't that name recognition out there. They can get it on the shelves, they can't really get it pulled through. And for us, we've always hovered anywhere between 98 and 115% on our reorder rates from day one. And so what these folks are doing, our whiskey family, when they're out there, they're not only telling the story and getting their favorite stores and restaurants to bring us in, but then they're getting us placed on cocktail menus. It's the wildest thing you ever want to see. And I don't know that the spirit industry has ever seen anything this organic. And I think that because people have always known the American whiskey business as being very homogenous, being very male driven, the fact that everybody has rallied around this brand, I think is a great lesson for us moving forward.
Amazing. So now tell me, you brought up a cocktail. What would be your favorite Uncle Nearest cocktail?
Oh man, I make cocktails every Sunday. That's just my thing. My husband and I, we make different cocktails. And every season I seem to have a new favorite. I can tell you what my 4 have been most recently. I love a penicillin, but instead of using Scotch, I use 1884 as the base and 1856 for the smoky top, for the float. It is incredible. And then I love a classic daiquiri, but I swap out the rum for Uncle Nearest.
Wow.
Phenomenal. And I love a New York sour with a full-bodied Cabernet. And I mean, those are sort of my go-to right now. And then every Sunday we wake up in the morning and we have what we refer to in our house as a grown folk mimosa. I've started to see it going on menus, so we're not the only ones drinking this for sure.
The
But it
pandemic
is
has made that much more possible to do.
so much more possible. I mean, literally thousands of people are constantly going and getting this recipe off my Instagram account. But the grown folk mimosa is it's literally 1 to 2 ounces of orange juice, depending on how boozy you want it. 1 to 2 ounces of oranges, a half of ounce of Uncle Nearest 1884, a half of ounce of Grand Marnier, and
Wow.
that gets you to about half of the glass. And then the other half of the glass, you top it with whatever is your favorite champagne. It is,
That sounds
you will never drink a regular mimosa again after that. Never, ever.
I don't know how many you could drink of that in one morning, though. That sounds pretty.
I've tested this theory. It's
very cool.
It's really good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
you so much for
you.
taking the time. And it's very exciting that we get to have 2 of your bottles to give away in our next giveaway series, which we're really, really, really excited about. And I have a feeling we're going to get lots and lots and lots of entries because we have big fans.
I hope so.
So thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. We're huge fans. And hopefully we'll be seeing Uncle Nearest in the 2021 competition.
Oh, you will. Absolutely, you will. I'm positive it's already there. So, yeah. You won't know until after you've judged
No, I
it,
will not.
But you will. But you will taste it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Fawn.
Cheers.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.